Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Dun& Bradstreet Budget Manthan webinar. Today, we'll be trying to decode the Union Budget 2022-23 and bring out some perspectives on the different results of the budget this year. We have a wonderful group of panelists with us today. So I will just start with the introduction of the panelists, and then we'll move on to the webinar. To moderate the session today, we have Dr. Arun Singh, who's the Global Chief Economist at Dun& Bradstreet. And as for our speakers, we have Mr. Anand Ranade, who's the VP Finance at Citel, Mr. Kumar, who's the Chief Investment Officer at Wipro Enterprises. We have Mr. Srinivas Rao, the Chief Executive Officer of Vestian. Then we have Mr. Thompson P. Nyanam, who's the Managing Director and Global CEO for 3i Infotech Limited. And finally, we have Mr. Yogesh Agarwal, who's the founder of Onsurity. Now I'll hand it over to Dr. Arun Singh to start the webinar.
Thank you, Kaustav, for such a wonderful introduction. Welcome everyone to the Decoding Union Budget session for 2022-2023. And thanks for joining. You know, budget is my favorite subject, and it's a favorite event, I can say. Why? Because this is one area of piece when it's basically when announced, there's a three different layer of analysis. One analysis is basically very quick, maybe the same day, and it's an instant reaction, what our finance minister is saying and what it means for the various sectors, various segment, and then way forward. Because end of the day, it's calculation, money coming in, money going out, simple CA terms. Now, that's a quick reaction. After reading the fine print, sometimes those quick reaction get reshaped and enhanced with more insight. That's after next day or day after that. And the third set of analysis, when you have a detailed research looking at each fine print, each data point and each segment, then you have a more insight coming in. Today exactly is the same thing. We are basically meeting after a few days to understand the better, the impact of the budget, what was there in the budget, and what it mean for us. For that, we have really great group of panelists who will basically walk us through their insight and what they feel and what it mean for us. So welcome everyone for today's budget discussion. Thank you. Let me set the context. Let me tell you the background of when we started the budget conversation maybe a few months back, when finance ministry started setting up those contexts, those planning session and rest of the things have changed. In fact, the union budget for 2020-2023 was framed on the backdrop of uneven recovery and uncertainty posed by the third wave of COVID-19. We all have seen. It's not basically long story. Things were improving prior to third wave, but third wave basically taken us to the different direction. It was not a popular budget for sure. I mean, we all know. Nor did it have any big bang announcement. That's most of people were surprising in spite of the third wave. It has been balanced, consistent and growth oriented budget with a stable policy on the tax front. And that's very important. That's very important from an international investor perspective, that we did not alter much the tax policy regime this time. It was more or less stable. Well, the union budget touched upon many aspects, from the digital currency, cryptocurrency, sunrise sectors to setting up the end-to-end online e-billing system, which might address the problem of MSMEs, and covering of 100% post office with the core banking system. This union budget talked about what I can say, what we are basically started calling is basically the phygital. When I say the phygital is basically focusing on the phygital infrastructure as well as the digital infrastructure with flavor to the infrastructure on towards the healthcare system. Basically getting the digital penetration to the healthcare, and that's what they have done this time. That's going to be and we government saying, and we are also aligning to this aspect. That's going to be a what we call the automatic stabilizer of the economy. Now, union budget, I think it's very critical to understand that what was there in that from a fine print perspective, what our experts feel, which area is going to be impacted, and that's important to decode union budget to understand how this will help the economy to emerge strongly from the crisis of pandemic last 2 years we are facing. We are fortunate to have experts like, we have Mr. Anand, Mr. Kumar, Mr. Srinivas, Mr. Thompson, and Mr. Yogesh. They're going to share their insight on this subject. To begin with, I'm turning wheel towards Mr. Srinivas first. I think you are into the segment for going to get a maximum traction during 2023 and way forward. The government has tried to cover many grounds, in this budget. Two area, as I said, that came out loud and clear: physical, digital, and with some focus toward the, healthcare infrastructure. It is always touted as the to emerge as the fastest growing large economy. That's India always consider. But when you look at the level of competitiveness, we are far behind against the South Asian economies such as China, Singapore, South Korea. There has been a some clear gain, but we need more. In your opinion, Mr. Srinivas, that union budget have addressed India's infrastructure gap, and how will the various initiatives they have announced, or maybe regrouping, or first time what you call the PM Gati Shakti, to help in closing this gap? Mr. Srinivas.
Just go off mute. Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Singh. One of the key points that I'd like to talk about today, like you rightly said, is the focus on infrastructure. If India truly wants to be a $5 trillion economy, and that's our aspiration, the most important focus for all of us should be infrastructure. And I think the budget has moved in the right direction. And last year's focus in terms of the Pradhan Mantri's Gati program, which talked about multimodal facilities and was the step in the right direction, in my view. But having said that, this year, the fact that they're expanding, the highways, they're also going to be building multiple multimodal connectivity and logistics parks, 100 cargo terminals. They're also talking about the Vande Mataram trains of 400 numbers or whatever that number is. All of this are actually the is a further step again in the right direction. I think the last year was all about laying the seed, and this year it's all about watering the plant. So from that standpoint, purely from an infrastructure perspective, I think it's a step in the right direction. What will also happen is by creating these multimodal facilities, logistic parks, warehousing facilities, what will happen is other ancillary industries or manufacturing units will start coming up more and more. I think one of the key things by increasing, or rather enhancing, the infrastructure of the country, we are actually creating the stepping stone for growth. And I believe that's going to be one of the biggest pluses that we are going to see out of this particular budget. And yeah, like you rightly said, one of the it's not a big bang budget. It's not about big announcements, in terms of personal taxes or anything like that. But I think this is pure focus on infrastructure is actually a big plus for all of us.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Srinivas, and you are right. I think there's no doubt about that. I think there's a clear focus, at least tone of the budget and putting some money towards that one, especially the road and the multimodal logistic park. If implementation done well, I think some of those historical problem of logistic chain, supply chain issues, things getting waste, the percentage of the wastage in the transportation sector in India actually is not that great. I mean, there's clear sign. I think they have realized that the logistic piece is basically holding the key. And you're right in saying that there's some focus around this one. Now, there's other aspect of as well when I talk about the fund allocation toward this piece. Coming to you, Mr. Kumar, uh, there's a one couple of elements we talked about, and prior to budget announcement, there was a expectation that government will find balance between social expenditure, capital expenditure, and things like that, because there is some other element. There's a revenue piece coming into this one. All looking at that, government allocated money toward the capital expenditure on a phase that looks huge money given to the capital expenditure, 25.4% growth jump. And they're talking about the effective capital expenditure. And from your perspective, I mean, how you decode the capital expenditure plan of the government and what you feel that it's really going to kickstart the recovery process.
Firstly, thanks Team DNB for inviting me to share my views. Now, there is a very famous saying in Sanskrit, Runam Tutvang Rutam Privet Javat Jivet Sukham Bhavet. So basically, what you do is that you fund a lot of your expenditures through debt, and the debt dies with you. But that changes a bit when you look at this in the modern era. What kind of expenditure you are doing? When you are funding your expenditures through debt, if the investments what we are doing, that's going to yield value for you in the future, then you don't need to get worried, because ultimately your cost of debt is going to be taken care by the investments, the returns what you're going to generate out of it. Now, coming to the Indian perspective, when you're talking about an economy which is roughly around 259 trillion kind of money, where we'll reach in terms of a nominal GDP by FY23. Within capex expenditure, we are talking about 7.5 trillion directly coming from the government, and IEBR is another 3.6 trillion. So we are talking about 11 trillion kind of money, which is going to be spent on the capex. Now the question is whether we need this kind of a capex. Answer is definitely needed. When you are given the circumstances, you have hindrances, you have obligations, how much you can spend, you need to look at your expenditures. What is must have, what is good to have, and what can be ignored. Now, capex is something which is must have, because we need that kind of capex. In a country where there were points we are just spending 4 lakh crore on the capex, or in 200 trillion, which is less than 2% of the money being spent on the capex. Now we are talking about at least that money going up to 4%. Now that's a very good move. And then we are talking about this is not something which is going to stop here. It's going to come in the next 5 years or 6 years, because the government has taken an expansionary path till FY 25-26, where they are talking about fiscal deficit to come to 4.5%. That's point number one. Coming to point number two, if you dig down this capex expenditure, most of this expenditure is going to come from the roads, railways, defense capital, and telecommunication. And then on top of that, there is a 1 lakh crore which is going to be given to the states at interest free for 50 years. So these are the money which is required. We are talking about to create 25,000 kilometers of roads in this financial year itself. These are all very, very welcome moves. Now this will have, because the difference between a revenue and capex is that capex has a lot of propensity to add value to your GDP. Every 1 rupee spent on the capex will have a much higher multiplier effect, because it's going to eventually land and create jobs, bring value to your field. The propensity is much higher. So that's a very good move in terms of, my personal view is considered. And also, if you look at it, this will help your logistics, your supply chain, and ultimately the PLI scheme, which is a big thing what we are looking at it, Gati Shakti and PLI, that's we are talking about to create 6 million jobs in the next 5 years. So those are very, very good and welcome moves. As I, one of the lines stated, next 25 years, now you're talking about Amrit Kal. I wish that we at least knock at the door of the Ambedkar. So that's what I feel on the capex expenditure of it.
No, I think thank you, Mr. Kumar, and I think your point on this multiplier impact and creating a job is really on the hitting on the nail, because I think that's the biggest issue today, and it's basically what we are looking at today, where we are putting our money, what ROI we are generating, that ROI is good enough. Basically, they have come up with this idea of productive with the non-productive sectors. So if they're putting in the productive and what multiplier impact coming in, and I think the capex it's one of that. One concern always is there, and I think that could be that could be basically we have to look at from a capacity utilization perspective, which unfortunately was just 60%. Because that's there. Hope is large that they're putting money and they're multiplying, so that at least the rest of the demand in the economy being created, so that at least the capacity utilization rate automatically improves. So thank you for your insight on that. Now, taking a one couple of points from that, and I think you well said about the job being created and the multiplier impact and then future job creation about the 6 million basically. Now, there's another element to this one, and MSME, for example, they have always considered as a job creator. In fact, it's not just job creator, it's also basically holding one of the larger space. With that context, I'm coming to you, Mr. Thompson, on the. I think 99% of a company in India belongs to the MSME segment, and there's a significant number we can call about the SMB space. They've faced several headwinds during last 2 to 3 years. In fact, prior to that, they faced multiple issues, low consumption expenditure they had in the economy, and that direct impact was that commodity prices going up. In fact, commodity prices now one of the biggest concerns. Supply chain, they pushed their inflation higher. That impacted this operationally, and they created an operational disruption. How would the digital initiatives taken in the union budget is going to benefit SME, or you feel that government could have done more to ensure that the impact of the pandemic is not hitting MSME, and what is the digital penetration you feel from SME perspective? Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Dr. Arun, for that, for this opportunity, first of all, and thank you for the question. Maybe I'll try and answer this in two parts. One is what is that first question that you asked is, what are the initiatives which the government has taken and which is positive, and maybe the second part I'll try and answer it from a perspective of what that we could do better. So the first part of it, if you look at the entire SMB segment, it's almost close to 30% of our GDP and a base of almost like around 75 million SMB base in India. If you look at it, it's a big opportunity for digital, because if I can put a digital index to it, it's only almost like only 3 million SMBs are probably digital natives or probably adapted digital. So that's where the start point is. And rapid digitization is a common denominator in SMB's growth. That's because this has been demonstrated across the world in a lot of economies. I'll touch upon that as well. So if you look at the positives of budget 2022, the way I will look at it, just to quickly summarize some key headlines, because the reduced import tariff on input, increasing, imposing tariffs on end products, which is a very welcome move, the way I look at it. Promotion of financial inclusion via announcement of almost 1.5 lakh additional physical banking facilities, which you spoke about the digital. I think it's a very important aspect. The 75 digital banking units to be set up, I think it's going to kind of really give more access to the MSME sector as well. And enhancing the emergency credit line schemes, expanded to March 2023 is welcome because the guarantee cover is enhanced from almost like 50,000 crores to 500,000 crores, which is extremely good, and it's a necessity and a needed oxygen for the sector. Gati Sakti infrastructure, I think it's very important and it's very core. The investments in that will facilitate a single domestic and a global market connectivity. That's the kind of the intent and the direction in which the government is going. I think we need to keep working on that and build this entire digital supply chain around it because it's very crucial. The national skills qualification framework is also, it's a welcome direction again, because MSMEs suffer with lack of access of good skills. So this will also kind of, complement and enable that. And finally, I think the MSME Udyam portal, the initiative which the government is saying that which we're going to kind of integrate the B2B, B2G, G2B services. I think that's again a welcome direction, the way I look at it. And so broadly, this is where currently, Dr. Arun, on a second part of the question, if I may kind of answer the question saying that, what should the government do to help maybe digital penetration among MSMEs, given that now we have an opportunity, because the way I look at it, Dr. Arun, is that, this is a great opportunity. It's a perfect storm. Post-COVID, globally, everybody's struggling. This is the opportunity for us to kind of, accelerate and, take advantage and, move advantage away from China to us and, progress in this Make in India and this India being the manufacturing hub. It's a great opportunity. With that context, if you ask me, what should the government should be doing in this aspect, I would say that there are a lot of best practices available. We don't have to invent anything. I would say even we have worked with multiple countries globally. As we speak, we are working with some other countries. Let me take an example of the Go Digital initiative of the Singapore government, because I would say that's one of the most successful I have seen. They started this 8 years ago. A lot of even IT services companies like such as ourselves, we have all worked with governments, and with this template could be kind of quickly adopted in India, because the key part is SMBs need to be educated on digital transformation because they're handicapped, they're technologically handicapped. So if you look at the Go Digital program itself, enables SMBs to be Industry 4.0 ready. Key headlines are that you have pre-approved solutions, they don't have to go anywhere. These pre-approved solutions, whether it is cloud infrastructure, it's PaaS or SaaS technology, which is productivity solutions, it's all available linked to a grant. So the SME knows very clearly these are prescribed by the government, and if I take it, I get this grant. And it's also productivity linked. I think similar to the PLI schemes we are now attempting to do with the manufacturing industry, I think this can be done for the overall SME. And also come up with some, startup digital packs, which is again pre-approved by the government, things like that. And also come up with some advanced digital solutions, because various SMEs on various levels of maturity. And to compete in the global, arena, we need to kind of, up the standards of quality. That becomes extremely critical to move up the quality value chain, kind of help them to go global. So it also needs advanced digital solutions, which are benchmarked globally. Our ability to kind of, interoperability, if you look at it, and as simple as even CTO as a service. And I'm just saying, I'm also trying to answer it from a technology company perspective. So fundamentally, to summarize that, we need to offer SME in a box, like digital in a box, which is edge ready, cloud, cybersecurity as a service, customer lifecycle management, order to cash, employee lifecycle management, predictive analytics, decision support for the CEOs. These are some examples I would probably say, which can be easily integrated and offered, along with government grants, subsidy, and productivity enhancement tools. Dr. Arun. Those are my thoughts.
So thanks, Mr. Thompson, and I agree with you. And when we talk about the productivity, when we talk about the go global, when we talk about basically being the market, I mean, there are many elements. And there are many things one can talk about this, and there are many elements basically needs to be done, and especially from the digital perspective, because these are the things, and we have seen last couple of years, in fact, many years, there is a hesitancy in terms of adopting a new age of the technology amongst larger, especially SMBs there. But pandemic taught us that the hesitancy was wrong to some extent, because everyone was forced to adopt digital platform, given their structure, given their size of the income and things like that. They have done this one, and they're quite successful. And 3 million digital native we're talking about, and that's given the size of the economy, where you have something around 30 million MSME. This is nothing. I mean, I think there is a huge scope, and there's all this huge scope when we carefully nurture and take it to the next level. Your competitiveness is set to go up, and I think I agree. And you mentioned about the startup, and then financing of the startup is always be the important point, not just today, historically. And with that point, Mr. Anand, I'll come to you. And that's a great story is happening today. India has become the third largest startup ecosystem in the world after US and China. In fact, there's a 44 record. There's a 44 Indian startups achieved a unicorn status in last year. I like your views. What is your view about the ecosystem? How that can be strengthened further? What avenues should be provided to them in terms of financing and easing compliance? Because I think we are talking of the next wave of growth story and creating a job. Mr. Anand.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, and thank you, DNB, to give the opportunity to present my views. And you're right. I think startup community is the most focused community right now in the entire economy, as far as India is concerned. Because if you see that last year, more than 2.5% of the new jobs, they were created by startup community, and that is a very high number. And now they are aiming at 3.5% to 4% in next couple of years. So I think we have everything in our blood, right? Our schooling system is fantastic, and I think it is the best in the world. Our primary schooling is the best in the world. We have all the innovative ideas. We have great talent pool. We have 50% of our total population in the range of 25, in the range of youth, and which is one of the greatest advantage that we have over the entire world. So I think all those things will come up when we promote startup, because it is good that now the Indian have gradually started their mental focus from the job only situation to entrepreneurship situation. And why it is because now they believe themselves that they can compete to the market, domestic market, as well as the international market. And government for last several years, I think last 4-5 years especially, they are promoting a lot of things. They are giving a lot of benefits, capital incentives, tax benefits, the exit benefits, and many other things. But having said that, I think there are still a scope for improving it further, because Make in India is now very popular, and people have we have started understanding it, that this is one of the core hub of exporting from India to the rest of the world. Ease of doing business, government has been talking for last 2 years. There are steps, and there are still some opportunity to make some progress. You mentioned compliances. So compliances can be done by ease of doing business, by a simple one-way window kind of thing. Like right now, even though GST is clubbed with 17, 18 other indirect taxes, still there are so many compliances that the companies and the startup companies will have to do. And the main question is that whether they will handle those compliances or they'll do their business, because it becomes as important as doing their continuous business, I think. So if government simplifies those under one window scheme, that will be great. Third thing, the startup are facing is the management bandwidth. I think we can leverage. We have a lot of entrepreneurs, we can lot of businessmen, lot of successful businessmen in our country, and those are willing, those are very happy to provide their expertise, to provide their support to this. So the large companies can take stakes into small startups and make them grow. Also, there can be a mentor-mentee program like Gurukul program, like when these biggies are they want to share their experience, they can extend their cooperation, they can extend their business knowledge, they can extend their contacts, and they can, in fact, they can change the whole scenario if government can create this kind of infrastructure, this kind of group. Because Nandan Nilekani, we all know that he was with Infosys and government took him from Infosys to, and when he introduced Aadhaar, people literally laughed at that because there were many other things which collapsed, and people said this is one of them. But now you're seeing what Aadhaar is making the difference, right? So people like him can be extremely useful for this kind of blood. And obviously the people are less experienced. They are highly talented, but they are less experienced. Obviously they have less patience. So these things, I think, if the biggies can plant in their mind, it will be a lot of help for these people. The financing can be one of these things. AIF is the new concept that is introduced in India for the startups, right? So the fund management and then for authorities are now equipped to create AIFs to invest into a pre-IPO or even the startup unlisted communities and give the returns to the common investors. I think this is one of the great move that the finance ministry is coming up with. So overall, I think to boost these things, we have a lot of scopes, and industry academia relationship, industry PPP relationship, private relationship. I think the mentor mentee programs, the Gurukuls, the single window platform for all the compliances, those all things government is trying to do, but I think they are not yet there. I think there are a lot of scope with these, and in couple of years I'm sure that we can see a dramatic difference from now up to 2 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Anand. I think, and you well said that startups have potential to provide 4% of the job. That's a great, and you're right that entrepreneurship is in our blood. And actually, in my research last 25 years, I have seen that that's basically a huge piece. That can't be that it will not grow. It will not take into the next stage unless these problem, which is basic problem, and talk about the skill, talking about the management, talking about the financing being addressed. There are many stakeholders. You have government one side, you have private, and we have many other agencies who can basically help. Need of the hour, how all the ecosystem come together to ensure that the glitches, those constraints are basically eliminated. And from that perspective, I think we are looking at up to the government to ensure that these pieces are basically taken care of, especially the financing. A lot of things done, and you're right. And but it's just basically we need to nurture those elements, because if you're talking about the Atmanirbhar Bharat and taking it next level, these are the ecosystem, and talk about the startup, MSME. They have to basically nurtured well and nurtured really in a great way. Thank you, Mr. Anand. Now the third piece coming on the health infrastructure basically, and that infrastructure being a focus, physical and digital we spoke, but then health infrastructure that's equally important. And I think the first time at least I've seen this mental health things is getting traction, and there's the discussion happening around it. I'm coming to you, Mr. Yogesh, with that. We know that India still lacks access to the affordable and quality health infrastructure. Last 2 years, thousands of the people have suffered from the COVID-19, and there are many, severe financial distress. And Earlier today, we were looking at some of those insurance data, where the policy is being rolled over, how many people are basically moving into that directions, and in the premium paid and rest of the things. In your opinion, what are the measures the government should take to facilitate insurance penetration? If I have to take an example for additional benefit under the income tax deduction or introduction of different tax GST slab or something, because I think there is GST under insurance premium that further added to the cost of insurance or other element, because health infrastructure is one side that the government continue to do that. How masses can keep them protected in terms of the natural issues or some other issues related to health. Mr. Yogesh.
Sure, Arun. Thanks, first of all, and hello, everyone. When we talk about health insurance in India, so basically there are like two schemes that generally how we can categorize it out. It's a government insurance scheme, which can be an Ayushman Bharat scheme, or a state-run own insurance scheme, which is predominantly covering the below the poverty line people. And effectively that covers almost close to 50% of the population under the Ayushman Bharat, where the government is sponsoring the entire insurance cost or the healthcare cost for the population or for the people. Then we have another 50% left, which is in that particular 50%, only 10% is having any health insurance. So that means 40% of the people are not having any health insurance. And that is where it is becoming like one of the highly underpenetrated market across the globe when we talk about the health insurance. And the pandemic had really caused so many people to move below the poverty line, who were initially in our middle class, but now had gone into the or just above the poverty line, but now had gone below the poverty line because of the pandemic and the healthcare expenses that had caused to the family. Couple of suggestions. Yes, the government can actually increase the penetration. First of all, if there can be a reduction in the GST, if required, might be the income tax deduction can be relooked at, but the GST reduction will definitely help the masses, because again, there are like a lot of people who may not be availing the Section 80D benefit, but GST thing is actually causing the increase in the premium, especially for the mass category where they do not have any kind of a financial support. So can we look at a rejigging some of the thing wherein might be a kind of a way where we will be taxing someone who can really afford it out and who have the money, while giving it at a very lower cost or putting lower level of taxes to those who cannot afford, or who have a affordability thing, but not a very higher affordability. So that is one thing that where we actually, as an industry person, we recommend it out.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yogesh. I think I'm looking forward for implementation of those advice, and I think there are people certainly will be beneficial if we do that and if we achieve that one. And thank you for your insight on that piece, because I think we need a wave of creating a health infrastructure, whether we talk about the digital, we talk about other things, that looking at those elements. And I think there are good scope. Government have taken initiatives by covering the masses and the privileged, but the other wave required when you're basically creating those wave of digital penetration into the healthcare. I think that's one, and I'll come back to you on a quick reaction about digital, and I think that's a need of the hour. Now coming, going back to Mr. Srinivas, and I think I would need your quick reaction, Mr. Srinivas, on the impact what we have seen now infrastructure spending, and you mentioned about the PM Gati Shakti, the road, and Vande Bharat and the multi-modal. Basically, that's a right direction. Now, that's one way, one step above what we have seen in the past. Now, taking a cue from that, now last 2 years, and there's one particular sector we have seen last 2 years, real estate and the construction sector, they were basically at risk. and from the demand perspective and from the labor shortage perspective, and that it has improved. That's a one concern around that one. Second concern, we have seen that we all are connected to one forum, but a different location. Probably 90% I could say that it's working from the home, and that's true for the corporate. And that's putting the commercial sector as a risk, and new work model coming in. Looking at all those scenarios, what is your view about the real estate sector, construction going forward, and what can be done to minimize this impact? Mr. Srinivas.
Apologies, sorry, I was on mute. Good question, Dr. Singh. Actually, I think we need to take a step back and understand the Indian real estate market. If you look at India's real estate market pre-pandemic, India has always been a 55 to 60 million square feet from a commercial office sector perspective. This is grade A office space that is absorbed by major corporates, not captive, not a Wipro or an Infosys actually building their own campuses. I'm talking about developers building speculative buildings and corporates actually leasing the space. So that's a 55 to 60 million square feet market India is. The best year we had in terms of absorption was 2019, where we actually absorbed close to 57 million square feet of office space. During the first phase of the pandemic, which is 2020, I would say, there was roughly about 36 million square feet of absorption that happened. In the second phase, which is the 2021 phase, we saw about 38 to 39 million square feet of office space being absorbed. Currently, this year, we are anticipating, I would say 2022, we are anticipating about 40 to 41 million square feet. This is in line with the 2016-2017 numbers, and that's what India's absorption has always been. So from a recovery perspective, commercial office space is getting there, but it's being driven by few cities as against the whole of India. So Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, now to a certain extent Pune. Some of these markets are actually catching up because there has been some speculative stock that has been built over the years, which is why there's a lot of absorption happening. Now, there are risks associated with the overall construction industry per se. One of our biggest challenges today is not labor. During the pandemic time, we talked about, labor has run away to their hometown, so we don't have people. But today, the biggest challenge in the construction industry is availability of material. Even if the buildings are getting constructed, if a tenant needs to move in or if a end user needs to move in, there is not enough material for them to finish the office spaces. So wherever there are chips involved, whether it's lighting, sensors, you name it, we just don't have the material availability today. So almost all projects which used to be a life cycle of, I would say, between 75 days to 100 days for 100,000 square feet office space to be built from a fit out standpoint, today is taking 120 to 150 days. And if this continues, right, we are going to see a further delay in overall returning of people to office because most of the customers are also redefining their office space. What used to be a 70 to 80 square feet per person office space occupancy, India is also moving towards 100 square feet per person in the last couple of years, thanks to the pandemic. So we've also moved away from, densifying the office to kind of moving away from densification. US has always traditionally been between 125 to 150 square feet, but India has this challenge. And with all of this, I think the commercial office space will come back to normalcy, I would say, in 2022. But I think the bigger challenge is going to be availability of material for us to build the office space and deliver it on time. Same thing for the housing sector, same thing for the commercial sector. Housing sector, again, same challenges. There is not enough material available from a finishing standpoint. So and logistics, thanks to the new schemes by the government, logistics are going to be easier. Men and material movement will be easier. But if the materials are not available, and average delays today, when I'm speaking to almost all our customers, our vendor partners, suppliers, we're looking at a 30 to 90-day delay in most of the material. So keeping all of this in mind, I think the recovery is going to be a little slow. It won't be a V-shaped recovery as far as the commercial sector or even the residential sector, purely from a material supply perspective.
Thanks, Mr. Srinivas on that. And I think shortage of the material, and that's another concern, that how the rest of the things will be basically taken up. And talking about, other infrastructure piece where things are finally handed over. It's not just one element. So I think this is the space we need to be watching, I think, in 2022. And thanks for your insight, and that was really good. On that front. Now, coming to you, Mr. Kumar, and very quick, and I think you mentioned about those capital expenditure multipliers, all good. I mean, everything is fine. I mean, government talking about putting more money is great. No issue about this one. Now, financing of this massive infrastructure plan always being a concern, and we have seen this historically, using fund from various sources, and that's fine. Now, where do you think, government would source the funds from? And if, for example, the government borrowing is very high and interest payment is around 43% of the total revenue receipts, roughly around 43%, which means you have left with just 57% to invest on those projects. So what is your view on this, Mr. Kumar?
Well, look, historically, interest expenditure has always been a major. Hello, is my voice coming? Yeah. So historically, look, the interest expenditure has always been the largest part in terms of the government expenditure. That has been the trend. Now, coming to the borrowing part of it, this year the fiscal deficit number is around 16.61 trillion, which was around 15.91 revised for FY22, which was around 18 trillion and 21. Now, if you look at the market borrowings from that part of it, 12.4 trillion in 2021. This year it's going to be around 8.76, and next year it's going to be around 11.6. Now, this kind of borrowing, has it been done in the past? Yes, it has been done in FY 2021. But the market borrowing, since from last year, is going to be higher by closer to 20%, definitely there will be pressure in terms of the interest rates. Now, if you look at it, the government securities, the govies, 10-year GSEC has gone up by roughly around 25 basis points post-budget, 672. Now we are looking at 696. SDLs have again gone up by, in the similar portion. The yield curve has definitely gone up by 15-20 basis points. On an overall scheme of things, the 15-25 basis points is not something very large. But if it is not curtailed, then definitely interest rate goes up by 50-75 basis points. Then it's going to definitely pinch the government. That's number one. Number two. Now, fiscal policy is done. It's all about monetary policy, how RBI manages the interest rate, which is the benchmark curve, the GSEC rates, the generic GSEC yields, how they're going to manage through OMOs, through switchings, basically, selling the short term and buying the long term. How they're well protecting that curve, that's something which needs to be seen. If that can be played well, and they are able to protect the benchmark levels, I don't think that will create such a significant issue, because we have banks are sitting with lots of cash. You have got insurance companies are sitting with cash. So everybody would like to buy that. But the bigger problem is going to happen in terms of your credit spreads. Tenor spread is something which is not a big issue. It's like government borrowing rate might not go that much. But if you look at the credit spreads, that means a AAA corporate to a AAA NBFC vis-a-vis and 10-year government securities, that spread was at all-time low for the last 16-18 months. Now that's where I'll be a little bit cautious, because that's where, once the GSEC yields start going up, who will then allocate money to the private sector? How that yield is going to be played, that's something which needs to be seen. But the good part, Arun, is that India as an economy, we are not very, very cautious about the interest rate. Just if you go back and look historically in the 96, 97, when the benchmark yield was at 12%, our capex was at all-time high. So somebody arguing that interest rate defines your capex, interest rate defines the spendings, that is not true in reality. What truly defines is it's the demand. If the demand can be brought into the table, it doesn't matter what the interest rate is. At 25, 50 basis points on an overall horizon doesn't make much of the things. If you look at last 2 years, interest rate has been historically low, but capex, private sector capex has been very, very muted. It has not come. Demand will define the supply. Supply will not define the demand. Like the liquidity defines the fundamentals. Fundamentals never define liquidity. It's that kind of story. So I don't see big challenges. And last point is that government has been slightly cautious in terms of their projections. If with an inflation of 5.5%, which we see likely to happen, then our GDP projections on a nominal basis is going to be higher than the government projections. So then there is an upside to the borrowing which is there. I mean, the borrowing which has been projected in marketed G-Sec borrowings to be around 11.75, that can come down by 1 to 1.5 trillion, which is provide a lot of respite to the market. That's where I would put my views in terms of the borrowing part of it. It's not something, the number is big, but we don't need to get worried.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. I'll just add one point, and you've fairly well said in terms of India is a different country where some of those parameters not as per the book actually completely different, because I'm economist. I've seen some of this economic theory when I put in the Indian context goes different direction. Still, we are doing great stuff. We're talking about inflation, GDP growth rate, and interest management. The trinity, what we talk about, capital flows, sometimes doesn't work, but still we are growing at a great rate. That's something I think good case study we should popularize. And I'm looking forward. I think I'm hoping that we will not have any concern in terms of the financing going forward. Yeah, quickly, I know I have to wrap up some of these things. We are running slightly behind the schedule. So I'll, quickly I'll come to you, Mr. Thompson, and I think Mr. Srinivas raised those problem in terms of the materials shortage, and that's true. Last 2-3 years we have seen in terms of the supply chain, in terms of the concern, and MSME was impacted more. Now, if that's a consideration we have seen last 2 to 3 years, supply chain, you think government would have done more, or what we as a country should have done better in terms of digitizing both the supply chain, especially into the MSME? Two things I think you're talking about: competitiveness in the world market, and we have a China other side, to increase this element, and also making sure that we are ahead of the curve in terms of our supply chain management. Certain things certainly will move on the ground, but there are other elements in the supply chain that can be digitized. What is your view on that, Mr. Thompson?
Thanks, Dr. Singh. So just to pick up from where I left, and I think Mr. Srinivasan spoke about also in terms of this entire demand and supply management. Both parts are very important. To build on this Gadi, Sakti program, definitely the logistics is given a boost with the roadways and the railways. But I think we need to kind of join the dots because these are all happening in isolations. I'll probably touch upon an example in agri-tech as well. But I foresee also by the year end, we're also talking about the 5G, because in my mind, 5G is going to transform digital supply chain, because this is going to power true blue edge computing, because we have to take computing power to the edge. And the unique opportunity is the convergence of IoT, AI, and cognitive computing at the edge. Because if you want to really have a digital supply chain, we need to move the processing power to the edge, Dr. Arrow. That's a very important part of it. And it also goes back to what I spoke about, digital in a box, even for the SMBs. And then we need to kind of join the dots in terms of these end-to-end process management, if I may look at it. Because for more effective digital supply chain management, we need to get as close to the edge, and it has to get more and more real-time analytics. We cannot be looking at descriptive analytics. We have to get into more, not even predictive. We have to get real-time analytics. Only then we can get into, cognitive systems which are able to kind of take decision at the edge and are able to monitor this entire chain. So that is a very, very important step we need to kind of, move forward in terms of advanced cognitive implants into our digital supply chain. So for example, I'll take some of the good things which the government is talking about. Let's say if you talk about a drone Shakti program, they're talking about drone as a service in agri-tech. The Kisan drones we are talking about. These are all good start points, but what it lacks is we need to have a comprehensive capability to move, and 5G is going to transform this, or even if not 5G, we need to get edge computing where we are able to move processing to the edge, where we have micro data centers which are able to enable a Kisan drone or a drone as a service. And then ultimately, I think we need to look at the entire chain. If you're looking at it, for us to become an export powerhouse, right, it has to be a farm to plate chain. We cannot look at it isolated, but I look at a cold chain or from an agri-tech perspective, we need to look at the end-to-end farm to plate chain. I'm just taking an example of the agri-tech industry, Dr. Harold. So those are my thoughts.
No, thank you, Mr. Thompson, and I think that's well said, and I think that's a need of the hour. I mean, we can't be taking bits and pieces. It has to be in a holistic and cohesive way from farm to plate, and that's basically, from there's a famous saying, I mean, it's from here to here. There's many element to this one. If you don't take care of those elements, that's basically any weak part is going to derail whole chain. And I think, in interest of the time, I have two last questions. I am to budget and I'll quickly move. Mr. Anand, I'll come to you in terms of those financing you talked about, the ecosystem financing. The end of the day, we get into the financing piece because that's a main pain point we have seen. How you feel the regulatory authorities like the NABARD can help with the rural digital penetration and formalization of the economy. So as India can address those of the challenge of what we call uneven recovery of the economy and equitable distribution of growth thereafter. Because I think some section, what we call unorganized, is basically not getting the benefit of what you're doing. Digital penetration is going to help, but NABARD and other regulatory authorities have to play a bigger role. What is your view, Mr. Anand, on that?
Yeah, thanks, Singh. And I think this is one of the biggest burning issue that India has right now, because for last several years, I think we have more than 66-67% of our population is in rural area. And as of today, 40% of that is not yet equipped enough to handle the growth or handle enough to challenges that the government is trying to cope up with. Uh, Power is one of the sector that these people are struggling with. The cellular network is another where the people are struggling with the internet connectivity and logistical help. Uh, so all those things, I think, unless you build a solid infrastructure, and 40%, believe me, is a very large number. I think NABARD and other institutions, I think they should come up with primarily build those areas, because if you have those in place, I think there is a lot. There is already a boom which is there for last 10 years. The Kamwali, I have my village, by the way, in Konkan, and I can correlate that I go every quarter. So my Kamwali comes with the smartphone and she plays with WhatsApp and all, but she doesn't do the internet banking. She doesn't do any other thing, and that itself tells us that she has to go to some corner and then she gets the signal and all. So these kind of things, I think government has to take on the rapid action mode. The Man Ki Baat, by the way, is very popular in very rural, all the rural sectors, in fact, and wherever I see. So we can, government can start something like that as a Kaam Ki Baat, because there are a lot of schemes from Government of India which are meant for the rural area, and the poor people doesn't even understand, doesn't even know that they are. And government is sitting with the funds and they don't know how to utilize in those funds in a best way. So there is a disconnect. There is a disconnect from the beneficiary standpoint, and there is a disconnect from the government standpoint. So maybe some companies government can introduce just to leverage the beneficiaries, and there I'm sure there can be a lot of help from this, because radio transistor, I can see people sitting on the chowdi on the transistor, and all the villagers, they sit together and they listen. So it's a layman language, everybody understands. And if from those medias, I think if government regulatories can spread their schemes and many other things, slowly we can see a change in this. And if US can outsource the work to India because it is cheaper and because all the infrastructure in place, I'm sure the urban also can outsource the work to rural area within India, I'm saying. And why not? We have a talent pool there itself. It's a matter of infrastructure building. I think when you have the good infrastructure, in fact, the population is good, the pollution is good, population is good, everything, all the way we have a positives in the rural area compared to urban area. The only thing that we have to cope up with is the basic readiness of infrastructure.
I think, thank you, Mr. Anand. And I think from beneficiary perspective and from knowing the scheme and benefit of the scheme is what we call awareness issue. And that I've seen in that frame, what they can do with this one. And, Ministry of MSME running thousands of schemes, and there are many other, and there are a critical scheme related to the MSME. When we ran the survey, and we found a significant percentage of the MSME not aware about the scheme at all. So that we have, I think, awareness and education, what you can do with Kaam Ki Baat. I think that's a great thing. And thank you for this one. And I have last question, and as an interest of time, Mr. Yogesh, I'll come to you. And I think you've touched base about this health infrastructure piece. And in this, I was saying that, digital healthcare system being, what the benefit we can draw from that perspective. In fact, the National Telehealth mental health program is a very important initiative, especially the work from home. Last 2 years we have seen and what people are suffering. Could you share what is your views on how this initiative will help and what more needs to be done to address the mental health issue in the country and how this can be linked to the digital healthcare system in India? Mr. Yogesh.
First of all, the digital healthcare system and its emphasis, what the finance minister had put during her budget speech, was quite commendable. I guess if it had already been started getting implemented, a lot of healthcare providers are now coming under the digital healthcare ecosystem and trying to get connected with the central repository. I think if that actually gets implemented in its proper format, then the overall problem of underpenetration of the health insurance will also start getting solved for, because a lot of insurers had started adopting and moving towards the technological innovation, and there had been a lot of shift towards the entire mindset from towards the customer first kind of an approach. And with that kind of a thought process, and there are actuaries, underwriters, new age insurance companies who are designing products which are currently not available to a lot of individuals. So someone who is having any kind of a pre-existing diseases like a diabetic or a hypertension, which because of our lifestyle had almost become like a kind of a lifestyle now. These two diseases, but as the person have these two diseases, the chances of them getting a health insurance really reduced a lot. So this digital healthcare system will help to solve that particular issue, and most importantly, will also help to build the trust in the overall insurance and the healthcare system. Currently, 70% of the claims of the customers are getting approved or paid by the insurer, and 30% are rejected because of the lack of data, the fraudulent suspects, or effectively there are like a lot of time that also goes in processing this kind of a claim. Now with the advent of AI and automation, these claims along with the digital health and the NDHM mission, these claims can be processed very quickly using the AI and automated workflows and the blockchain. Of course, we all need to, and the government needs to ensure that the data what is there is completely private, it's completely stored properly, and there is no chance of hacks. Because we have seen in Aadhaar there were issues that have popped up in the past. So how we can actually secure this digital data, and that also require a lot of infrastructure to be built in to ensure the digital healthcare data is secure. Now, coming to the mental health thing, I guess, yes, because of the pandemic, there have been families and some of the members in the family had started suffering this around and bringing this particular, and again, in India, it had always been a taboo subject. But when a finance minister in a parliament had discussed this kind of a topic, it actually gives an indication to a lot of us who might be having some kind of a problem to come up front to discuss the problem and to actually get this particular problem healed, because we take care of our physical health, but the mental health was always be considered as a taboo. But I guess this kind of where platform is actually now trying to minimize that kind of a taboo. And of course, we over the last couple of years, we have seen a lot of corporates, lot of companies had given a lot of support to their employees, where they, and not only the corporates, but also a lot of gig platforms had given a lot of support to their even delivery boys, where they can actually speak to psychiatrists, conduct, attend webinars, and also there are like round the clock helpline, which can actually help to solve this mental health issues. So this is where what we, and again, mental health definitely can have a very higher presence on the digital fulfillment part. Rather than on having like a one-on-one physical consulting, a lot of people are preferring a one-on-one teleconsultation kind of a mental health. So the government initiative of having those lines or the national health lines on the mental health will definitely help a lot, and to also help people to get aware about their mental as well as physical health more appropriately.
No, thank you, Mr. Yogesh. I think I'm hoping for that. I think that's because I think this is going to stay and this is going to remain in the core issue category, and I think government needs to address. And there are many elements determined. I think there are many things. I think we all discuss about what you call blockchain, the digital and the infrastructure. There are many elements we had, seen in the budget, and we should have discussed this one. But for interest of the time, I think I'll wrap up this one. And thanks everyone for insight we have provided. You all have provided. While we'll open this forum for Q&A, I have already 2 questions for us. And Kaustubh, you can open forum for the questions. But in the meantime, I'll give it while our audience asks question. In the meantime, I have 2 questions for us, and there's no name attached, so I'll ask who's comfortable answering this one, and that basically we can pick this up. From a private sector perspective, to generate a job from the private sector, what this budget have? There's very, very general questions. Anyone want to answer?
So I think,
Mr. Kumar.
Look, if you look at the PLI schemes, so the jobs are primarily going to come from the private sector itself. Now, with the tax incentives being extended up to March 23 with the new productions, definitely this is a very, very welcome. So these are the 2 things which will help you to create the job from the private sector side of it. Very clearly, if you look at it, the government jobs in the country are reducing. In the last decade by decade, every decade, if you look at the number of jobs as a percentage of the total jobs, it is very clearly reducing. Number 2 is that if you go to the pre-pandemic, the unemployment was roughly around 30 million, which is now closer to 40 million. So there is a 10 million gap which has been created. People are unemployed. Government cannot fulfill this. Do not getting into the nitty-gritties of it. If you look at the last railway recruitments, what happened? Everybody is kind of new and they're struggling with that recruitment part of it right now. Definitely, the private sector is going to take a lot of benefit from the PLI part of it, a lot of benefit from the uh, export focus part of it, a lot of benefit from ease of doing business. There are still a couple of ways to go. Definitely, we do not have the labor laws so stringent like our China or other countries where the multi-year fixed contracts are not available. Those things at some point will come. But what we used to be 10 years back, what is the kind of uh, things which are available? We have come long way. So the private sector pie will keep on increasing as we usually keep on moving apart from it. And thirdly, now creating about that AC jets, which a lot of companies are demanding now, coming out of the new regulation itself, where state governments will also be a part of it. All those things will create a thrust. And of course, capex. And in capex, we are very clear. It's going to be in PPP model. No way it's going to be in government spending. PPP is the way. There is no way out. So which will come. PPP, of course, we are very successful initially. Then there were headwinds where we had the land acquisition related issues. So that's again, getting streamlined. So we will slowly and steadily will progress towards the goal.
So adding to what what Arvind said, one of the key, Kumar said, is that there are going to be tier 2 and tier 3 smart cities that are going to be created by the government. So I personally anticipate a lot of opportunities for private sector to go and build some of the commercial residential segments in those markets, and that will give a huge opportunity for employment in tier 2 and tier 3 locations purely from a housing, commercial, infrastructure sector. That's going to be a big opportunity that we will have. And out of the 600,000 jobs that the government is envisaging to create, I think a large segment will probably come in from this particular sector.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Thank you, Mr. Srinivas. Anyone want to contribute to that particular question? Because I do agree that government can provide enabling environment and create those subsidy space in the area where basically the maximum benefit being provided. Government can't go and provide the job on behalf of private sectors. Private sector themselves have to basically leverage these schemes and start growing. Yeah, we are looking forward. Yeah, Mr. Thompson, you.
Yeah, see, just to add our own example, because post-pandemic with this borderless workforce, now jobs have all moved virtual, and more and more customers are okay with it. And even we are now looking at tier 3 COEs, where we are building these center of excellences. And also government participation is very high, whether it's the state and the central, whether it's a Skill India, subsidy for training. So for us as an employer, it kind of helps us kind of proactively invest in some of these jobs, and our overall kind of cost comes down. And this could be now replicated. So now we are looking at these hubs in deep south, far east, far north, which traditionally we wouldn't have looked at it. We would have looked at your metros or your top 7 or 8 cities. So this will also help the reverse migration of jobs from metros to rural, and it will be profitable to the enterprises as well.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And I think, sorry, I didn't say, yeah, for the interest of time, I think we have, I need to take one quick questions, there's and one more questions coming in from our audience, is basically talking about unorganized sector. I think it's a reality that last 2 years, because of the pandemic, unorganized sector segment, which is huge, which is large in India, was impacted. So the government would have done better, or they would have provided more. What is our viewpoint? I mean, they have done. Is there a multiplier impact is going to be taken care of, or something government should have done better in those space? What is your viewpoint? And there's no name attached, so I'm asking open questions to our panelists. Anyone want to take up?
It's globally, look, everywhere post pandemic or unorganized sector, things are moving to the organized sector, because the good companies who have the bandwidths to manage this or ride through the pandemic, they're valued very well, and which is good also up to some extent in the sense, because we need at the end of the day consolidation. Consolidation of banks has been doing well for us. Consolidation of smaller companies to larger companies will also do well. Now, if you want to keep everybody happy, that's something which is not possible. Through the guarantee schemes, of course, large extent of MSMEs have been taken care. But definitely, the consolidation is something which is a reality and we have to accept it. We are, to give an example, like when the Bombay mills or mills were shut, government took this employees on a roll and kept on paying salaries, which has been in history. Is that a right model? Or the second right model is that you allow these companies to die or allow a bigger company to take it over and higher productivity to be created? So that's something what we need to look at it. Of course, when the scale will automatically take care of create a lot more productivity, and the unorganized sector will actually take a lot of benefit out. It's not that they will not be a part of the journey. They will definitely be a part of this journey, because ultimately whosoever is the big aggregator who is accumulating all those things, he needs to create that capex, he needs to create that productivity. So definitely everybody is going to be joining to that bandwagon. So that's a good thing to happen. It's not a bad thing to happen.
Mr. Srinivas, your viewpoint, because I think construction and infrastructure we talk about, sometimes they are considered as to support the related unorganized segment of construction, cement, steel, and all that. That ideally you think, and that's indirectly you think anyway is going to benefit unorganized sector, unorganized market, and labor. What is your viewpoint on that?
So from an unorganized sector perspective, I mean, I think our labor industry, I guess we saw a lot of visuals during the pandemic of people going back to their hometowns. Getting them back was the biggest challenge that the construction industry faced. So we had to, a lot of us actually had to fly people back from their hometowns. Some of them had to bus back thousands of people back to the work sites. So we probably saw the biggest, impact from an unorganized. I mean, what the government could have done better. I think some of the state governments have come up with new laws in terms of the unorganized sector with the BOCW clause, where they actually are asking us to deduct 1% of the overall project cost into a common pool with the state government, which can be used for the unorganized sector in terms of, taking care of them in the future. So that I think has been a good move. But I think that needs to be expanded more. I think I'm sure, the rest of the panel will agree. One of my biggest challenges during the pandemic was how do I provide health insurance to or take care of my unorganized sector labor that was at site. Anybody falling sick, there was no way I could, there was no medical insurance. I mean, whatever we did was I think as we went along, as we moved along, as the challenges came by, we try to face and mitigate that. I don't think there is really a thought process in terms of, how do we address, should there be a fourth or a fifth wave? How do we address these labors? Because most of the corporates took it upon themselves and paid for all of the unorganized sectors, medical bills or the food bills and stuff like that. I think from that perspective, personal view, again, I think we missed the boat on that. I think we should have addressed it better. But again, we'll see. Maybe, it is pandemic time. The government cannot please everybody and address every issue. So from that standpoint, I think, maybe next year we should look at a better way to help the unorganized sector address this.
No, thank you, Mr. Srinivas, for that input. Thank you, Mr. Kumar, and thank you, Mr. Thompson, for taking on those questions. It was really wonderful insight you all have shared, and in fact, I wanted to continue this conversation, but I'm conscious about the time. We have exceeded well. I think it was wonderful discussion, and I'm looking forward to have such a nice, insightful conversation and engageful conversation going forward. I'm sure our audience got a better benefit of having a detailed insight and information from all of us. And with that note, I will close up today's panel discussion. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
A very big thank you to all the speakers today with us, and thank you to all the audience who have joined us today. In case you have any further questions for us, you can always write to us at india@dnb.com, and we will try to get them answered. All right, thank you so much. We'll close the session now. Thank you.
Thank you.